is a huge privilege to be with you today. I've been looking forward to this for several months since Phil asked me to be a part of this day with you. And I feel like I'm among people that are my kind of people. Anyone who'll come out and spend a Saturday to learn how to improve their lives, improve their churches, improve things around them, I feel like I'm talking to my kind of people. So the next 18 minutes, I think we're going to have a good time together. We're going to talk about an interesting topic, a very personal topic, and yet it's also one that you can use where you worship. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. These words come from the opening lines of Charles Dickens' famous book, A Tale of Two Cities, about life in Paris and France and London, England, during and before the French Revolution. And I think he nailed it. When he says it was the best of times and worst of times, when I read through the newspaper today, there are a lot of bad times out there, and there's some good things happen too. When I look at my life, I see things that are great, and I see things that cause me to wince. It's really interesting how life is definitely a two-sided coin, and our lives are a two-sided coin. Today, my goal is to share with you why I think it's so important that we share both sides of ourselves with others, so that our lives and our churches are infused with realness, with love, with self-acceptance, and a happy way of being that breeds growth, that breeds satisfaction, and breeds even physical health. There's two sides of us if we're growing. There's a wonderful side, and there's the not yet side. There's the in progress side. So we're going to talk about both of those today. We're going to talk a little bit about why it's so important that we do this. Also, why we're so bad at it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to go about it to make sure that you can have some success with this. You know, we have to do this because even as infants, contact with others, healthy contact with others, is a matter of life and death. Early in the 1900s, in the foundling homes or orphanages, where babies were brought who didn't have parents or parents left them somewhere, the survival rate of children who were brought in under 1 year of age was 30%. 70% of children brought to these foundling homes died. In Dublin, Ireland, 10,000 infants were brought to one home, the Dublin founding home, over a 25-year period, and 45 survived out of 10,000. So when you took someone back then to a foundling home, you took them with the hope that they might somehow survive. But the likelihood was not great. So they began to do studies, of course, to find out why. And in one home, there was a little premature baby who was so small that he fit in the palm of your hand. And he was thriving, while babies around him were dying. So they put a 24-hour watch on this infant to try to find out why he was living so well when those around him who should have had a higher chance to live were not. And they found out that he was small enough to fit in the pocket of the cleaning lady at night. And she sang to him, and she talked to him, and she picked him up, and she smiled at him, and she saved his life. See, at those times, they would lay the bottle next to an infant. They would not pick him up necessarily to feed. They weren't played with. They were taken care of. Their physical needs were met. What they did not understand was that the immune systems weren't going to kick in unless they were related to. So for infants, it's life and death. For all of us, if we had not been talked to, 70% of us in this room wouldn't be here. Now, as adults, it's still a big deal also. I just noticed that my own timing clock didn't get started. So that's one of my, how shall we say, growing things as a speaker. But So, as adults, it's very important that we have the same kind of contact. In fact, without it, you can really, really be in bad shape. Years ago in Alcatraz, adult prisoners were not allowed to speak to each other. No contact, no talk. And they finally had to rescind that rule because they kept taking people out in straitjackets. They would have complete mental breakdowns from lack of conversation. Now, you and I are not adults in that position. We're in a much better position. And there's a myriad of reasons why we need really open contact with one another. And I'm going to tell you one of them. And that is that if you don't feel like you are known well by other people, you will tend to doubt their love. And you'll go around wondering how acceptable you are. So this openness, this talking about both sides of honest, is really, really important. Several years ago, I started a meeting in my home. And one of the discussions that we had was, why are we so bad at being able to open up ourselves? And this meeting was for personal growth. I'd been to a workshop. I loved it. I liked personal growth. And I decided to start one in my home. I'm a clinical psychologist, but I wanted to have one that I could be a member, leader of. So it was not part of my office. There was no fee. I advertised on Craigslist in my condo newsletter, sent emails to all my friends. I found a dozen brave souls who were willing to get into personal growth and do some experimenting with me as their leader. The first night I asked everyone, tell me what you are happy about being here. Tell me what you look forward to. And also tell me your greatest fear about being in group. What would your group nightmare be? Well, the first fellow who spoke up turned out to be a natural leader. He was a tall, handsome fellow. And he said, what I really don't want to see happen in group is that I'm judged for who I am. Whether it's my taste in music, whether it's the problems I struggle with, whatever it is, if I'm judged for it here, that will probably be the end of it for me. And interestingly enough, as we went around the group, when it came to the part about what's your worst group nightmare, 12 out of 12 people, once they heard that, said, this is my group nightmare also. There's lots of things that could go wrong in a group, but being judged, apparently, to those 12 people was the worst. So one reason we're so bad at it is we're afraid of being judged. Now, let me say something briefly about strengths and weaknesses. We all have both. Strengths give you confidence. They tell what you have to offer to other people. People admire you for your strengths, and they find you interesting because of them. Now, when it comes to your flaws and your weaknesses give you humility. It's really important to have humility. And if you think you can do it all, you're not going to have humility. Your flaws show you what other people have to offer you. They show you your need for them. And also, your flaws, when they're known to other people, make you approachable. Other people feel more comfortable coming to you. And it makes you more interesting. So your strengths make you more interesting. Your flaws make you more interesting, particularly if you're a growing person who's trying to do something about your flaws, if you're trying to improve yourself. I attended a workshop out in California one time, supposed to be about creativity, intuition, and personal growth. And when I got there, it was not run very well. We were all supposed to sit in a circle and talk about the most uncomfortable things about us that we could, with no sense of balance and sharing, no sense of safety. And the group kind of rebelled and got into a power struggle with the leader. Well, there were several people there that week that I wanted to know. They were interesting people, but at meal times, seats weren't available next to them. Conversations were flat. And it wasn't happening. Well, as the week went on, I'd come from here to California for this workshop. So I said, I'm going to do something to try to get something out of this. So as uncomfortable as it was, I talked about something about myself that I was really uncomfortable about. I don't even remember what it was. But what I do remember was that at the end of that session, every single one of those people that I had wanted to know so much, they walked over, sat around me in a semicircle, and started to talk. In my mind, I gave them several reasons why I was a dud, and apparently that made me interesting to them. So I shared my weaknesses, even in an unbalanced way, and I got results. It was really wonderful. So we're afraid of being judged. We don't need to be so afraid of our weaknesses, though. They will help too. Secondly, we don't have the skills. I work with sex addiction. That's one of the things I work with. And one of the very unpleasant tasks that some of my clients have is to go home to their spouse and give them a complete history of their behavior. Now, this is prepared ahead of time. The spouses have requested this. Usually they want it. But my job is to help prepare the man so that this can be done well. So I usually have them write it out, and we discuss it together. Well, one poor fella was going to start his like this. I've never loved you. I've never treated you right. I've been sexual all over the place, and I'm so sorry. Now, that was not going to help his wife, if she was any. He was not very skillful at what he was trying to do, so we reframed it. He said to her, I've never known how to get close to you or anyone. I've never known how to manage my problems, and I've hurt you terribly. I've lived a life of panic, of falsehood, and betrayal, and I am so sorry. It's different, isn't it? It feels different to hear that. Skill. There is some skill involved in this, in sharing yourself. Thirdly, you're going to want to have some ability to love yourself. If you don't like yourself and you try to share yourself, it's kind of difficult. So if you have bought into a theology that's excessively negative about human nature, you're in trouble. As self-evident as it seems, God loves us because we're lovable. We do things wrong, we're still lovable. We make messes, we're still lovable. For those of you who have children, do you only love your children when they do everything right? No. You love them when they're right and when they're wrong. So if you got a little bit of confidence, you can step up and begin to start. So how do we go about it? Well, my key point today is that if we share ourselves in balance, it'll be easier, less dramatic, more inclined for people to reciprocate. We can be real in church, real with our neighbors, real with our friends. And we'll see more reality come back to us, and our lives will get lighter, happier, and our physical health even may improve. So, how does this sound? You're in a Sunday school class or Bible study or some group somewhere, and it's time to share a prayer request. So you say, my son is not speaking to me. He won't have anything to do with me. I just don't know what to do. Okay, how uncomfortable is that to do? You know, no one's exactly sure how to respond. People try to give responses back. How does that compare with this? You know, if it's true. You know, my relationship with my daughter is the best it's ever been. But my son is not speaking to me, and I'm very worried about that. That's easier to share, easier to hear, easier to people to respond to. You said the truth. You've gotten it out there. But you put some of the bad and the good. The bad news and the good news, you put them out there together. You shared both. So when it comes time to talk about your work, when it comes time to talk about your finances, and you want to share something you're scared about, share something first positive. It'll be easier for you to do that. Then share the negative, and the whole experience won't leave you feeling so exposed, so scared. It'll make it easier for you to do this and give you some of the honesty you need with other people. I think of this as speaking on both sides of honest. So share yourself gradually. Look for reciprocity. Take turns. Avoid sharing with people who want to superficially fix you, who have no understanding about the realities of life. Don't throw your pearls before swine necessarily. So do this with some skill, work at it, practice it. You'll get better. A man was coming to church one time looking for a new church. And he walked into one church and sat down in a pew just as they were reading from the prayer book. We have not done those things which we should do, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done. And he breathed a sigh of relief and said, finally, my kind of people. And that's the way it is. We want people come to church to grow, not to get perfect. Dorothy Satin, who's famous for her work in psychodrama, wrote a book once called Real is Better Than Perfect. And I've really taken that to heart. Realness Your realness is better than perfect. But don't be horrified by the bad news side of it. If you share your bad news side as someone who's growing in context, you'll be acceptable. You'll be loved for it. You'll be appreciated for it. And other people will experience you as warm and accepting. The truth is usually acceptable if explained in context. That's important. So forget spiritual pretense. Those who require it of you will be boring. You will have more fun. And your church, your life, your family will grow. Thank you very much.